I'll call to order the Lake Mills Public Works Board meeting of August 9th, 2022. Sam, could you do a roll call vote?
Mr. Picard,
Here.
Mr. Temperley,
Here.
Ms. Curler,
Here.
Mr. Polachek.
Here.
Everybody's here.
Your mic might not be on there.
Is Mr. Wright
That
here?
center button.
You resigned.
Oh, okay. All right, so up next is the correction and approve of the minutes of July 12th, 2022. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I have a correction. It says that you were there running the meeting.
It says I was there.
You called it to order, and I don't think.
No, I was not there. I was in.
So that called to order by myself rather than Todd.
I think Sam's taking minutes. You there? I'm sorry. You there, Sam?
I am. Who called the order?
Mark Picard called the meeting to order at the last meeting.
Okay, we'll make that correction.
Thank you.
So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of July 12th with the correction that the meeting was called to order by Vice President Mark Picard.
Second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote.
Lisa Curler made the motion. Who was second, please?
Mark.
Mark Picard.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Picard,
Aye.
Mr. Temperley,
Abstain.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Polachek.
Aye.
Motion passed.
All right, up next, questions and public comment. I think some people are here to provide comment on the ATV ordinance. All right, so just go up there. Is there a sign-up sheet?
There wasn't when I came in.
Oh, all right, just state your name and address then.
Hello, my name is John Drake. Address is W5412 River Hill Drive, Johnson Creek, Wisconsin. I am the current president of the Jefferson Half Mile ATV Club. We represent about 85 members. We're good friends with Quad County runners. And I would just like to share that almost all of Jefferson County is open. We've been very involved in the opening of the communities and writing the ordinances, and we've had very little issue whatsoever. I was at a Jefferson City Council meeting last Tuesday night, and they want to rewrite their ordinance with a resolution to open up all the streets in Jefferson as soon as possible because of the economic impact that it can have on the businesses in Jefferson. So that's why I'm here tonight, just to share some of that. March 4th of 2020, the governor signed a bill that actually made it very good for the ATV, UTV community. Took the label off of tires of off-road use and flotation tires. Anybody that drives on the road has to be 16 years old, valid driver's license, proof of insurance. 16 to 18-year-olds have to wear helmets. And, you know, the machine's got to be registered and they have to have proof of insurance in the machine. So it is something that's come a long way in the state of Wisconsin. I don't have the exact number of machines that are registered, but it's close to 430,000. Year to date, off of the DNR website, today I saw there was 6 fatalities, which is a very low number for that many machines registered. So I appreciate your time. Any questions?
Would you be willing to act as a spokesperson for the group?
I'm the president of the club.
So when the agenda item comes up, I do have some questions.
Okay.
Better if just one person would.
Well, I'll be the spokesperson for our club. I mean, there's other folks here that may want to speak. I know there's a couple of gentlemen from Rob's here and maybe some other people.
No, it might be just better if there's one spokesperson. Then does that make sense? To just make the meeting go quicker?
Yes, it does.
So, and if if we don't address something, then they could raise their hand and I could allow them to speak
Okay.
at that time.
Okay,
All right,
sounds good, thank you.
all right. Okay, if everyone's okay with, what's your name again, Mr.?
John Drake.
If Mr. Drake can be your spokesperson for the agenda item, is that okay? Okay. Any other public comments?
I don't understand. Do you want other people to just show their support for the matter, or?
This is public comment?
Yeah, this is public,
Comments at this time?
yeah. But, I mean, it's obvious everyone's in favor, right? So, yeah, we get that.
Steve Holman, 410 College Street, Lake Mills. I just also am in favor of this. In addition to what the last gentleman said, when I'm out and about, like at our up north cabin, I communicate with those people on the ATV boards, and also people of the elected community, and they're all finding about the same situation, that it's been very positive economically for most of the communities up north. In fact, they actually rely on it for a lot of their economic growth, as far as restaurants, bars, gas stations, etc.
In grocery stores.
Grocery stores, yeah. Anyway, I read a lot of the memos, and I just think that, part of the issue with either accidents, deaths, and whatnot, that happens to be a math equation. Whenever you have certain large numbers of people in one place, things happen. So it doesn't necessarily matter if they're in an ATV, a car, a snowmobile, whatever, these things happen. So I just would like to make that comment. In addition, I read some stuff about, kind of dragging our feet on this and making it part of the comprehensive plan and whatnot. I don't think this has anything to do with the comprehensive plan whatsoever. The comprehensive plan is basically a wish list for developing and what we'd like to see in different areas of the city. I don't think it has anything to do with that whatsoever. Anyway, I think it would be a great addition to the city. We're unique in our downtown is already vibrant. So in communities where they're looking for an additional spark, this is a hot topic. Here we have a very, very fortunate downtown that's just booming, and I don't think that this will definitely negatively have any adverse effects. However, in the numbers game, when we're talking about additional traffic, a lot of these people are already going downtown, and they'll just be on an ATV where you can park probably 2 to 1 in the same stalls. In those regards, I just think it's really, really positive. Thank you.
Steve's also a member of the Planning Commission, Mark and Greg, so. All right, thanks, Steve. All right, we'll go on to the director's report.
All right, thanks. I shall be short because we've got a lot of stuff on the agenda today. First of all, the AMI information. I think I mentioned last month that we're starting to finally get meters now, both water and electric. So we are getting that done much quicker. We do hope, we're really going to push hard. We do hope we can actually get almost close to done by the end of this year with all those meters. So we're encouraged by that. Staffing. Staffing is a frustrating and interesting situation right now. We did offer, or actually hire, an operator to step into the wastewater treatment plant. We still have one opening there, and so we are looking for another individual to work there. We had one opening in the electric utility, a lineman. We did extend an offer to a gentleman on Monday, and then today one of our current linemen resigned, and so we will be having another opening there. The biggest issues we're hearing, neighboring communities are offering $4 to $5 an hour more, and there's some feeling of unsettledness, if you will, with employees right now, with a lot of change going on. And so we're trying to battle through all that sort of thing. But it's like I say, it's frustrating, but it also, we're trying to stay on the positive and think we've got some new people coming to town here. There's one right there. Yeah, you're hired. That's my report. Thanks.
Thank you.
Would the board object to move agenda item 7 before 6, so these people can go home?
What was the question, sorry?
Move agenda item number 7
Up.
or 6?
Yes.
Okay,
That's fine.
so we're going to do item 7 next. Discussion recommendation amending City of Lake Mills Ordinance 609 vehicles all-terrain currently tabled. What was the motion last time?
To approve.
To approve, but you tabled it? So we make a motion to untable it, Dan? It's been a long time. Yep, so I need a motion to bring it off the table.
I'll bring it back. Yeah.
All right, Greg Polachek made the motion to,
Move to bring back.
Second,
at the second.
from Mark.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. So for the record, my brother has a campground spot in a resort, Missouri, and he's got ATVs. And while, yes, they're designed for all-terrain, when we go back to the campground, we're subject to a 25 miles per hour speed limit. And also, we have to have a official campground license with a brake check and all that. And when we need to go to get groceries, rather than use our cars, it's much more convenient to use the ATV, because they're easier to use. And I know my son goes to college in Platteville, and we stay in Monroe Point, and they allow them, and as an automobile driver, I have no issues of interacting with the ATVs in those communities. And my wife and I are also considering getting one to do our local shopping, because they're that much easier, they're cheaper, and it just makes economic sense to put wear and tear on a cheaper ATV than a four-door sedan. So that's pretty much where I stand on this issue. The only concern, if Mr. Drake, do you want to come up to answer questions about ATVs? Because there's one concern I have is the police memo wanting them to drive on the right side of the road. I mean, ATVs have the capability of doing the speed limit, correct?
Well, typically what we recommend when we go in front of municipalities is we recommend that they ride in the lane of traffic, the direction that they're headed, and it's posted road speed limit. Do not ride on the shoulder, do not ride in the gravel, because then we're not throwing gravel on the road. Every ordinance that we've been part of has been written that way. It's right, your lane of traffic, if you're going east, you ride in the eastbound lane at the posted speed limit. If the posted speed limit's 45, you go 45.
Because our police chief recommended they ride on the right shoulder, which in our city is the bike lane, and I'm also a bicyclist, and it's like, I mean, the ATVs are obviously going to overtake the bicycles, and they're going to keep pace with the cars, correct?
Correct. Most ATVs, UTVs will do any speed limit that's out there, 55, 60, 65. It's not safe for an ATV or UTV to ride on the right shoulder. That's why we recommend and we suggest that lane of traffic, the direction they're traveling at the posted speed limit.
Just mini cars is pretty much.
Correct.
Yes.
I mean, a good example is I have a Polaris Ranger. My Ranger is actually larger than a smart car. If you've ever seen a smart car for two, my Ranger is larger than a smart car. It's safer. It's got full roll cage. It's lighter. It has a lot quicker stopping capability, and it can get up to speed a lot faster.
I would challenge the statement that that vehicle is safer than a smart car, which has gone through national traffic safety, meets national traffic safety standards.
But is that for highways? I mean, we're
A
talking.
smart car is a highway-rated vehicle. It
We're
meets all, it has airbags.
Yeah.
Right, that's the only thing a UTV doesn't have is airbags.
Right,
But
but-
we have a full roll cage in it, roll bars. full tube frame. It's not a frame construction like a smart car where it's a unibody.
It's not designed to the same standards. It's not engineered to have crush zones and things like that.
But what about the motor scooters? We got people, I mean,
Motorcycles are a completely different animal than scooters. I'm just making the comparison between
Right.
cars and trucks and other things that are very safe vehicles, and ATVs and UTVs, which in my mind are more like a motorcycle or a scooter.
Well, I ride a motorcycle also, and I'd rather drive my Ranger than ride my Harley Davidson Ultra Classic, to be honest with you.
yeah,
I understand.
I agree with you. I try to ride a motor scooter. I can't balance it. But four wheels doesn't tip over unless you turn the quarter too fast, so.
Right. But those are some of the recommendations that we make when we talk at municipality meetings about opening roads to ATV, UTV use. There are the rules that the state of Wisconsin set forwards that everybody has to follow. As far as time of operation, we always recommend that the municipalities, I'm a town supervisor in the town of Aztalan, and we have a ATV, UTV ordinance in Aztalan also. And our hours of, I guess, curfew are from 11 PM to 5 AM in the morning. And we recommend those hours because we have farmers that want to get out to their fields and people that want to go hunting. And so we try to keep everything a commonality between all the municipalities.
If I could make a point, I believe the county and the town of Aztalan both have a 10 PM to 5 AM curfew, is that correct?
I believe it's 11 PM. No, you're right, it is 10 PM. Yep, you're correct, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, when you say curfew, you mean they're not allowed
Correct.
during that time period, 10
Correct.
PM to 5 AM? Okay.
Yes. In the city of Jefferson, it's a little different. It's 10 PM to 8 AM. We had to make that agreement to get the Perner Street Bridge over the Rock River open so we could get from the east side to the west side. But even the chief of police said that at the county fair, there were some ATVs there at the county fair, and they were out of the fair park by 9:30 on the road, going to wherever they were going. So most people that ride ATVs, UTVs are very responsible and are respectful for the laws. That's what I've seen in being a club member for the last 8 years and now being a president for a year and a half of our club, so.
Yeah, that's my observation too at my brother's campground. But as with any mode of transportation, I mean, in high school, I had two classmates use their Camaro to do spin donuts in the principal's yard, so. I mean,
Well, I have 3 Camaros in my garage too. so.
yeah. And 2 summers ago, we're riding down South Main, heading towards Sandy Beach. Some guy pulling a boat trailer pulled right in front of me, and I just bounced off his trailer, but a few more feet and he would have crushed me. So you have to put up with accidents no matter what. But yeah, I think for the most part, these clubs are not going to come in here and do donuts and cause mayhem.
No.
Because they know that as easily as this ordinance can be passed, it can be repealed, so.
Right. One thing that I would recommend also, and I know this is Department of Public Works, but like the gentleman that spoke after me now talked about the project list or whatever you have going on here, it shouldn't be part of that. But in the city of Jefferson, I spoke last Tuesday night at a city council meeting, and they formed a committee because the sunset clause in Jefferson is January 3rd. And like in the town of Aztalan, we review it every 6 months. So we can always pull the privilege of riding ATVs, UTVs on the road if we see there's too much of an issue or too many complaints. But I got invited to be on the committee for the city of Jefferson to redo the resolution and the ordinance to step it up to open up the whole city probably by October. So I'd be more than willing to be part of a committee if the council would see fit to do that.
I don't think we're looking at a committee, this is it. So
Okay.
this is experiment. Normally, the Public Works Board doesn't deal with traffic laws, but a few members on the council, because we don't have a traffic advisory committee, threw it our way. So this is pretty much new for us at this board.
But we would be happy to answer any questions or be part of any discussions that would come up. No problem with that whatsoever. It's just got such an economic value to the community. Like was said earlier, that these machines, they replace cars, so you're not going to see much more traffic, if any at all. But
And there's electric UTVs, aren't there?
well, yeah, there's 4-seater UTVs and then there's 2-seater UTVs.
Electric ones are much cheaper than Teslas, right?
Quite honestly, I have not seen an electric UTV yet. Have you guys seen an electric? Okay.
They're coming. I Googled it. They're coming. I mean,
What does Can-Am have for electric?
Right now, we just released for 2020, 2023 stuff, and some lines are starting in all our categories.
Yeah.
Whether it's snowmobile or side-by-side ATV.
okay, yeah, no one can hear him because he's off the mic, but for the gist of it, electric ones are coming down the line, and
Yep.
we already got the infrastructure in for electric cars at the shopping center, so,
Correct, yeah, that's what he was saying.
Okay.
His name's Dave, by the way.
all right.
I have one
All right,
question.
great.
Go ahead.
All right, I'll let others ask questions.
Okay, I have a question for the gentleman. Can you elaborate a little bit on the city of Jefferson? Why a little bit of their history, did they allow the vehicles on some streets and then it just became too cumbersome to enforce? Or why did they choose to open it up to all streets?
Well, I'll go back probably a year and a half when we started really getting serious talking with the city of Jefferson. The former chief of police, he would only allow us to open up certain streets. So we have Dewey Road to Perner, we have North Watertown to Perner, Perner across the Rock River to North Jackson, and North Jackson out of town, which turns into N.
Right.
Now, with the county highways being open, that's what's really driving it, because the mayor feels that Jefferson's closed for business right now with all the county highways that come to the city limit and stop, and nobody can go anywhere from there. So that's what's pushing it right now, is the county roads coming into Jefferson. He wants to see Jefferson open for business.
Okay, thank you.
And we did have a 1-year sunset clause, which would be up January 3rd of '23. But there's been no issues, no problems. They just want to move that up a few months and get it rolling a little bit quicker to open up the whole city.
Thank you.
Are ATVs allowed on any state highways in the county?
Depending upon if the community goes to the state and lobbies to open up the state road. I'm not sure about Jefferson County, but I do know up in Dodge County, Fox Lake, Highway 33 is open within the city limits of Fox Lake. There's other communities that state highways are open within the city limits. But that community has to go to the state and say, we want to open this section of road from point A to point B.
And in the rest of the county, the township or the county would have to petition the state outside of cities and villages, correct?
Correct.
And that has not happened in Jefferson County, correct?
As far as I know, it hasn't yet.
Thank you.
I believe Jefferson is gonna get Highway 18 and Business 26 is theirs, but I know they were talking about Highway 18 from city limit to city limit.
Excuse me, can I interject something to the council? This is Kurt Orcutt with the Quad County Runners.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I live in Lake Mills, in the town of Lake Mills, out on the west side of town. I had started with the club and getting the town of Lake Mills opened up. They've gained a lot of access. As far as the question on the state highways, yes, there are state highways in the county of Jefferson County. Highway 89 in Waterloo and Highway 19 in Waterloo are both state highways, and they are approved to have ATVs and UTVs on those. So I believe the way that this clause states through the statute is that any state highway under the speed limit of 35 miles an hour that goes through a jurisdiction that has been approved has the right to ask for that road to be opened up through their jurisdiction. So in our case, it would be Highway 89 from down by St. Paul's Church, where the city limit starts, all the way up to the intersection of Highway 89 and Highway V, where the speed limit starts to increase again going over the bridge.
Right, but we're.
Does that answer the question?
Well, yeah, but, I mean, I don't live in those streets, so if I get one, I'm kind of stuck. So that's why the proposal is for all streets, correct?
Well, those streets don't get approved until
The
the
state.
city
Oh, so we-
council approves the rest of the city.
We have
So
to- we have
if
to
the
approve
rest
the
of the
main,
city approves,
so we have to approve the main streets before we can approve the rest of the city? Is that where?
Established routes, period.
Right.
Any state highway is subject to state approval. They're correct there.
Uh,
So if we
oh.
identify Highway 89 is Main Street, if we identify that as a local route, we still have to get approval from the state to allow that to happen. But Kurt's right, if you identify point to point and you have local jurisdiction over it, that is commonly approved.
Okay, so we have to officially declare the state in
You
Maine.
have to declare it as a route and then ask for approval through the process. That's all established in statute.
So what about the rest of the streets in like Mills?
Those are state highways.
Oh,
Highways, specific
is everything.
number of highways are the distinction. All local roads, the city has the authority to govern over and establish as routes.
Including the county roads.
Yes, so long as they're subject to local jurisdiction, once it crosses a line, that's my understanding. You don't need like county
Right.
approval for X route, like once it's in local jurisdiction. Numbered highways are different.
Yeah,
And what would remain not ATV accessible would be State Highway 89 outside of the city.
Yeah, and Kurt brings up, I mean, through what he didn't say, he brought up an interesting point there. How do you cross the overpass from the Highway B to like north of the interstate in the city of Lake Mills? I personally don't know that you can, because there is the change of speed limit as well as that local jurisdiction issue. And that's DOT jurisdiction.
seems to me you should approach the state of some way, because it's all convoluted, don't you think? I mean,
There's a state statute on it.
But,
All
yeah.
has to review that.
all right, okay, all
could you
right.
repeat the question about getting to the north side of the interstate?
Yeah,
that what-
this is Dan Drescher, the attorney for the city. I think you brought up a pretty interesting question there. You can definitely petition the state for approval of a route that is Highway 89 within local jurisdiction, as you described, north to south from the Highway V all the way down to St. Paul's. That is basically the extension of our limits as the city of Lake Mills. What about crossing the interstate to the north? The city has city land that's been annexed to the north of the interstate, but my understanding is that that overpass is DOT jurisdiction, and I'm not sure that, I don't know what the answer there is. It appears that in other circumstances, you can cross roads and cross bridges on an ATV without any kind of route established. However, because of the speed limit changes you identified there, as well as just the circumstances, I don't know how they'd treat that if you could get approval from the state for that overpass to be part of a local route.
Yeah, so the under 35 mile an hour is already approved through the state statute. And all that you have to do is go to the state and tell them, we approve that through the ordinance for the city of Lake Mills. Now we need you guys to tell us where the signs go and put the signs up. So
My understanding
how that works
is a
with
little
the
bit different, Kurt. I believe that the state has the right to reject that because it is a state highway. I don't know that it's compulsory on them to approve just because the city wants to adopt an ordinance with regard to state routes.
But the first step is to approve the ordinance.
If that's, that, you guys are making a recommendation.
Yeah, recommend, yeah, we're only recommend.
Right now, the
yeah.
ordinance that's in front of you identifies all local routes as, or all local streets as ATV routes.
All right,
I do not have it with me, but our club went and lobbied the state for the business 26 overpass over 26. That's in the town of Aztalan. Speed limit's 45. And we have approval. That's an approved ATV route by the state of Wisconsin, that overpass.
I think that's a parallel situation. That may be a good argument in the event that that overpass is sought for a local route.
Okay.
Yeah, so that
It
is
does
how that
cross an
works. The way
interstate.
that
Yeah.
the way that John explained that, you do go to the state for anything over 35. Right now, the Quad County Runners has 4 different sections of state highway over the speed limit of 35 that they are working with the state to open up to get to the next adjoining street or county road, or to get around an obstacle of a bridge or something like that. So John is right. You just petition to the state, and the state usually lets all that stuff go through if it makes sense and is safe.
That's still some, usually, I believe that the state still has authority to deny that application in the event that they have any reason to. I don't think it's compulsory, as I stated. I agree with the process, though.
Mr. President, I think at our last Public Works Board meeting, we tabled this, and based on my notes, it was for two reasons. One is there was a suggestion by a board member that we might want to consider recommending a non-binding referendum so that we could learn how city residents feel about this. And the other was we were looking for some more information from staff about what is in neighboring ordinances. And I didn't see any new documents with our agenda today, so I just wanted to check on that second item, I guess, to see if we have any updated information on, what's in the various ordinances, because I think the idea was that we could then maybe use some of those examples to help make some recommendations to the city council.
I certainly have audited a number of local ordinances. I haven't put it together in memo form at this point. As we discussed in the last meeting, I kind of picked certain ordinances in certain cities that I thought were similarly situated to Lake Mills, and it's not prepared at this point.
It varies a lot. I mean, I Googled on YouTube. I mean, some are strict, some require turn signals, and I know you could buy turn signal kits for $300 and have them installed, but that's pretty much what I found. Some communities have problems with them and others do not. It really depends on the community. Like Rockford has an issue, but that's just Rockford.
Well, turn signal kits are not required per state law. I want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
And Todd, you said Rockford had issues? What do you mean by that?
Just ATV clubs just going down to the park.
No.
Yeah, but that's just Rockford, so,
Right.
yeah. So, but,
So I know, appreciate Mr. Drake, you being here and answering a lot of our questions. I think the time of operation was also something that Chief Selk had mentioned in his memo. And I think he had a couple of other suggestions for possible changes to the ordinance language, that we could consider for Lake Mills. And I think another topic that we could consider is, are there certain streets where we may feel they're not appropriate or they should not be allowed? I was in vacationing in the town of Aqua a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed, I was actually quite surprised to see that some of the streets are not open. Some of the roads are not open to ATVs, which I thought of as more of a rural area and that they would like that for economics. So I just wonder if we should spend a little more time thinking about, are there certain streets that maybe would not be suitable for this, and then seeing what the other, what the ordinances are in the rest of the county and making sure that we're aligned with that and maybe can make some suggestions for changes to the, additions to the ordinance proposal that would match what some of our neighboring communities are doing.
Well, typically, the way that the signage is posted, it's posted, I'm just going to use Lake Mills. City of Lake Mills streets are open for ATV use unless posted. So that would be up to the city council, whoever, to determine what streets are not posted. It's a lot easier to post a street for no ATV use than it is to go around and post every road that's open. It's a lot less expensive to do that way also.
right, but it's just easier to do all or nothing. I
Right.
mean,
And then you post the roads that, you'd like closed.
All right.
Well,
Any more?
I'd like to make a motion that we table this for one more meeting so that we can get that summary from staff of what are some of the requirements in the ordinances on our neighboring communities. And then that way we can make sure we're, using some of those same good ideas and making any recommendation to the city council.
Is that a motion?
Yes, that is a motion to table.
She's made a motion, so there needs to be a second to table it again.
I would also like to say, if you go out on
There's a
our,
motion on the table.
Yeah, just a
Okay.
second, yeah.
okay, sorry.
I need a second. Going once?
I'll second that.
All right, so we got a second to table it. I've got enough information myself. I've been in other communities that allow it as an automobile driver, and I've driven one myself. So I'd say we just open up every street, because like I said, it's easier to use to go to the grocery store, put it on the wear and tear on an ATV.
Are we having discussion on the motion to table now?
I think that's what's appropriate.
Yeah,
I just didn't want to table, I just wanted to have a little more discussion before tabling it.
Oh,
right, so
That's my thought process.
Okay.
so we're gonna vote, yeah, so we have a discussion on tabling, then we vote on the tabling.
Yeah, sometimes I thought maybe there was no discussion on a motion to table.
It's administrative, you guys can discuss as you see fit. I'm not
Okay.
going to stop you from discussing the issue at hand.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, internet's got a lot of examples, like I mentioned. For some, it works well, and others, it doesn't. So we just don't know, and if it doesn't work out, we just repeal it and ban them again, so.
So I'm for tabling it for two reasons. First of all, I was vacationing in Hayward, Wisconsin, and I was surprised to see some of the roads closed, just very similar to Minocqua. I was expecting to see ATVs everywhere, and it was sporadic. It was hit or miss. And that made me wonder, well, why are they closing some roads and not others? I would think that in Hayward, you would open up the entire area.
Yeah, so small, yeah.
So then that got me to think, well, is it better to open up all the roads and then selectively close as you have problems, or is it better to start slow, get people used to what you have, and then, very similar to what the city of Jefferson, that's actually what was behind my question in the city of Jefferson, what led them to finally just say, you know what, we're opening up all the streets, because they're used to it, and all the highways get there, and the economic development benefits, et cetera. But they're used to it. You already have it in some cities, and now you have specific routes, and now they've opened it up all the way. So there's two different approaches, and I think that actually getting a little more information from the city attorney could help us to make a better decision.
I think there's room for changes to the current ordinance on the table. And of course, we'd like to see that fleshed out more in terms of restrictions. Certainly I think it's definitely, we should have the 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. time restriction. And there's a lot of things that could be done that are safety related, things that are in the police report and the city manager report. A lot of those, I think, maybe are already covered by state law, but any that aren't probably should also be included in the ordinance. And I don't see any reason to hurry this along. Jefferson County is reconsidering their ordinance. They put a 1.5 year sunset clause in their ordinance and are reconsidering it before November 30th. Obviously, if they changed theirs, which, I'm guessing chances are they're not going to, but if they did, that they would change the way I would look at this for the city of Lake Mills. So again, the ordinance, I think, needs to be some additions made and get more information from other sources and see what the county does.
I think there's a distinction here. You are recommending board with regard to the ordinance that has been sponsored and prepared for city council review. The city council sent it to you for a recommendation on that ordinance. I don't know that you should necessarily change the ordinance language itself, as that's what was presented to you, but you could certainly amend the motion that's in front of you that states this is our recommendation to add the Public Works Board's recommendations. So I'm happy to provide more information on the audit that has been kind of prepared. There's a large range of different types and styles of ordinances that address this issue. One thing that I find quite appealing is a resolution method where a local municipality just adopts 23.33 and the ability to establish routes within the city, and then by resolution on a more nimble basis, the city council could then establish specific routes, all routes or Ferry Drive east to 89 and nothing to the east from there, whatever it may be, just an example. There's also, I think the ordinance that's in front of you that was sponsored by Councilperson Catherine Bishop is a little bit more, it covers more issues. It makes specific statements with regard to state statute than mere adoption in a way that establishes all routes in the city of Lake Mills, at the same time being a very unrestrictive ordinance. It doesn't add extra restrictions that the city could elect to have, requiring helmets, requiring different speed limits or extra equipment for ATV operation. It's a pretty broad ordinance that she has presented, and I think the goal at this meeting, or when you ultimately do address the issue, should be to comment on that ordinance, to make a recommendation with regard to what is in front of you.
So we can't change the ordinance, but we can make.
I'm not saying that you can't, but that's what's been presented to you, and they're asking for a recommendation. I think the motion that you make, the recommendation that you make, could contain, these are our recommendations, and then the council level could choose to amend the ordinance as they see
So
fit.
it's
based
sticky
on those
notes. We're
recommendations.
going to vote to add sticky notes to the ordinance, and you should change.
I'd prefer you add sticky notes to the motion and not amend the specific ordinance language.
So
Leave
we
that
don't-
to the council.
So we do make recommendations all the time, so we'll make recommended amendments rather than actual
You
amendments.
could recommend that
Now-
23.33 Wisconsin statutes is fully adopted and that all routes in the city of Lake Mills are ATV routes. That could be your recommendation if you want it to be quite simple. You can recommend specifically what the ordinance is in front of you as it's stated. You could recommend changes to that ordinance. You could recommend that there are no routes allowed in the city of Lake Mills. I think that's the kind of feedback that the council is looking for.
Well, Catherine's listening, right, Catherine? I thought I saw your name pop up.
I'm right here. Yes, sir.
Been following all along?
I have been, yes.
Okay, so you're taking notes, right?
Yes, so if I may make one statement, the ordinance is broad and it's for a reason. It's because a lot of the things that we've been talking about, even in this meeting, such as helmets or insurance, are already covered both in state law and in the county ordinance. And what you'll find in the surrounding ordinances are provisions that appear on their face to be different from mine, but it's because they've called out specifically certain pieces of the state law because they wanted to reiterate it to their local municipality, not because they've added something different necessarily. And so I didn't call out those things specifically. I was relying on what is already required in state law. But if there are specific things you'd like to see, I would like to know what those recommendations are, and then we can see, okay, is this already in state law or is it not? If it's not, we can consider adding it to the ordinance. So that's my perspective on it right now.
Yeah, so the two issues I sent to you were very minor, but I brought up something the police chief mentioned, wanting to the ATVs to ride to the far right as possible, but Mr. Drake and I discussed that's kind of a bad idea.
I'd like to clarify.
Right, and that's actually in contravention of state law. State law says the ATV
Oh,
will be
okay.
used in the right of way.
Okay, all right, well,
Let me just quote the chief's report. He doesn't say to ride in the shoulder. He says to ride in a single file line in the furthest right portion of the road.
Yes, state law requires you to ride in the lane as if you were a regular vehicle. So you're not going to
Okay.
be riding like to the side of one lane or another.
all right, I'm fine with that. Just
you.
my only
So
concern.
the motion that's in front of you guys right now is to table.
Yeah, again, right. All right, so let's do a roll call vote on the tabling again.
Mr. Temperley,
No,
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Polachek,
Aye.
Mr. Picard.
Aye.
so the motion fails, so it's not tabled again.
Motion passed 3-1.
Oh,
3 yeses.
Yes, motion
I
passed
didn't catch
3-1.
that. I'm so sorry. I apologize. All right, so it's tabled again. So it's the end of discussion for tonight.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here.
All right, up next, agenda item number 6, Demonstration discussion regarding Aqua Aerobics wastewater process.
All right, with us are representatives of Aqua Aerobics. They happen to be from Rockford. Just like-
No.
Actually, from Beloit.
Okay,
Oh, no.
well, that's much better. I couldn't let it go, sorry. And then also our representatives from Strand are here. And basically what we want to accomplish is just let you see this process that we've mentioned to you. This is a little different process for the treatment plant, and ask some questions and kind of get an understanding. And what we'd like to see, if we can accomplish tonight, is some next steps. I mean, are you interested in learning more? And that may involve taking a tour to Rockford to see the system working, or is it a complete shutdown? We don't want to consider this, but what we don't want this to just be, okay, here it is, thank you. We want to see if we can keep some action going on this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Quimby, who is with Aqua Narita, and he'll make the presentation. And my understanding is that he's got a few slides to go through and then just open it up to questions and comments.
Yeah, so let's let him go through all the slides, and at the end, we can scroll back to the beginning, so write down your questions. After he's done, we'll go back to the beginning and go through with our questions.
All right. It's all yours, Brett. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to keep this pretty basic and quick and just go through just some of the basic information about who we are in this technology that we're introducing, which is known as aerobic granular sludge technology. It's a relatively new wastewater treatment process, at least compared to the conventional technologies that you typically see. And so we just wanted to go over those basics, let you know what our technical capabilities there are, and what are some options for considering this technology. So I'll just flip on to the next slide here. And the next one, please. Thank you. So quick introduction. I'm from Aqua Aerobics Systems, which is located in Loves Park, Illinois, outside of Rockford. So as was said, yes, our company is located in Rockford. I myself, again, I'm from Beloit. So we have a little bit of animosity there on the state line. But I get through it most days. We're a medium-sized company, about 160 employees. That's held steady for the last 10 years or so since I've been working there. And our big focus is on supplying wastewater treatment technologies, not just the equipment, so not just the mechanical things like mixers and things like that, but whole entire processes, which we back with performance guarantees and things like that. We'll move on to the next one, please. And the next one. Thank you. So, as I mentioned, aerobic granular sludge is a relatively new technology for wastewater treatment, but new is a relative term in the wastewater industry. It moves very slowly. So the actual initial work that went into this technology goes back to the mid-90s, so it's been around for several decades now. And the technology actually originates from the Netherlands. It came out of Delft University, which is a leading research university there, by Professor Mark van Lustrik, who's also come up with many other innovative wastewater treatment technologies as well. Ultimately, that technology is picked up by Royal Haskoning DHV, which is also out of the Netherlands, and they commercialize that to what they call the Narita process. And so that's a process basically that treats wastewater by creating granular sludge, which is different than conventional processes, which make a more fluffier, lighter, flocculent, we call it sludge. The main difference between the two being that flocculent sludge settles very slowly and not as well, and granular sludge is very dense and compact and it settles very quickly, which has a lot of benefits for the treatment process, which I'll get into shortly. So research work in the mid-90s led to the technology being developed, and the first plant went online full scale in 2005. That was in the Netherlands. So that was now over 20 years ago, or almost 20 years ago. So there's considerable amount of experience in operating these full scale around the world. We ultimately ended up picking up the license for this technology in the US and Canada in 2017. So The technology comes from the Netherlands. We have the license to carry it, and we work very closely with Royal Haskoning to continue developing the technology here at our facilities in Rockford. And that includes our demonstration facility, which is, again, is always welcome for visits, very easy to get to from here. That's a full-scale, fully operating plant that can be visited at any time. We also have a fleet of pilot units that can be used to verify the performance of the technology at any site across the U.S. If you could please move on to the next slide. Thank you. So globally, this technology now has over 90 installations, of which 55 are currently operating. The other ones are under construction. And here in the U.S., that's 10 of those are in the U.S., including 5 which are operating, and the others are under construction. If you can move to the next slide, please. This is what that looks like in map form. It's a little bit difficult to see with the colors, but the green stars there are all of our operating plants. So we have plants, including ours in Rockford, and Whitefish, Montana, Idaho Springs, Colorado, Walcott, Kansas, and Foley, Alabama. And then everything you see there, that's a purple square. Those are the ones that are under construction, which include plants in Purgatory, Colorado, South Sioux City, Nebraska, Greenville, Michigan, Bainbridge, Georgia, and for anybody interested, Maui, Hawaii is going to be going online in a couple of months here for those looking for some place to visit. Everything else that you see on there, the blue circles represent plants that have selected this technology and are actively designing a new plant or a plant upgrade around this technology, but no contract has been awarded yet. And then everything that's in a red triangle is where we've conducted pilot testing. So we've been pretty active across, all across the U.S. and Canada over the last 5 years. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this is what our pilot equipment looks like. We have 2 different types of unit that are available. On the left would be our full-size containerized unit. So that comes in 1 or 2 shipping containers, depending on which unit. And it's a little bit difficult to see there, but that gray kind of pipe-looking thing that's sticking up from the side of the scaffold there on the left of that image, that's the reactor. It's about 21 feet tall and about 4 or 5 feet wide, basically like a large column. And it's meant to simulate a full-scale reactor. And so it has all of the instrumentation and controls and equipment that a full-scale plant would have. It would allow you to test treating the wastewater that you have at your site here, basically using all of the same equipment for the most part, and verify performance. The unit on the right side is actually it's a modified unit from a different technology that we carry. So it's not the same technology. It doesn't have the full same range of capabilities, but it still allows us to put the granular sludge in there, run the same type of treatment process, and verify the performance of that technology. The only thing that it can't do that the big scale one can do is it can't produce granules. So that's one of the key aspects of this technology, is that it not only uses that granular sludge to treat your wastewater, but it also produces the granules. And you can achieve that with the full-scale unit, not with the smaller one, but it still does verify the technology, at least if you need a simpler, smaller scale test. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, as I mentioned, the main difference between conventional sludge and granular sludge is the compact nature of that granular sludge. You can see what that looks like in this image here. There's granular sludge on the left and flocculent sludge on the right, and both of those have been let to settle for 5 minutes. One of the biggest issues in a treatment plant that uses a conventional biological treatment process is the settleability of the sludge. The less it settles, or the slower it settles, the bigger you need your system to be, the more difficult it is to operate. And so a lot of those problems get resolved, and you're able to get your treatment process in a much smaller space if you're able to consolidate that sludge and make it settle better. That's the whole concept behind the technology. Next slide, please. This is an image, or a video actually, of 2 different samples of sludge settling in real time. So this should start, here we go. So we took two samples. We took a sample of our granular sludge and then conventional sludge on the left, and we let them settle for 30 minutes just for a visual representation. Don't worry, this does get sped up, so we're not watching it for 30 minutes. But you can see, just even within the first 10 or 20 seconds, the vast majority of the material in the granular sample is already settled. And then within about 5 minutes, that's pretty much all it takes for it to completely settle. We usually allow for about 10 minutes in our process, which is substantially shorter than what you would need for the conventional sludge, which takes the full 30 minutes, and it still doesn't settle to the same degree that the granular sludge does. So, that's really the biggest difference between the two processes and really what the aerobic granular sludge process has to offer. Next slide, please. And next one, thank you. So another aspect of the technology is that if you have to meet some type of difficult or challenging quality for your discharge, particularly in terms of getting rid of nutrients like nitrogen or phosphorus, that also can be done in a more compact manner with this technology. In a conventional type plant, typically you'll need to have dedicated areas or zones or tanks that are dedicated to each specific part of the process. For this part for getting rid of the nitrogen, this part for getting rid of the phosphorus, etc. They're kind of add-ons, and they include extra space in your plant. All of that in this process can be done in a single tank, so you don't need to have extra space for those particular functions. And that's done by changing the conditions inside the tank by turning air on and off, and also by having different conditions inside the granule themselves. Because all of that biomass is kind of in a big ball, the conditions are actually different in the outer part of the ball than in the inner part of the ball. And so you can get different types of treatment inside those granules themselves and not have like different tanks for those different functions. Next slide, please. A typical installation would look something like this. In most cases, your plant is going to have some kind of a headworks with pre-treatment, like screening and grit removal. It's typical at most plants. Then, in some cases, we would recommend having an equalization tank, basically a tank to split the flow up. In most cases, it's not necessary, and flow can go directly to the granular sludge reactors. It's treated, and then any downstream treatment following that can be any of the same treatment that's used in any other conventional process. You don't need any special considerations for after treatment. This is just a quick process animation that walks through all the steps of the process. I'm not going to get into too much of the details, but basically it's a 3-step process where flow comes into the reactor from the bottom. It makes contact with all of the sludge, which is at the bottom, and that's where the first steps of treatment take place. And when it's doing that, when the flow is coming in, it's also simultaneously displacing treated wastewater out of the top of the tank. So raw wastewater comes in, it pushes treated wastewater from the previous cycle out of the top. You can see here, so all of the discharge elements here are at the top of the tank. And that's handled by, basically we design this grid of piping in the bottom so you get a nice even flow that does that without letting out any raw wastewater out of that top part. The main portion of the process takes place in this react phase, and that's when we'll turn on air in the system and aerate the tank and mix it. So this is where most of your biological treatment takes place. It uses oxygen and any of the to encourage all of the biology inside those granules, basically to take up any of the organic matter and the nutrients that are in the tank. So again, as I mentioned, you have different conditions inside the granules themselves, and that's why we're able to condense this process into a smaller space. Once all of that part of the treatment process is complete, then the final step is to allow it to settle, and then it's ready for the next batch of wastewater to come in from the feed piping at the bottom. So again, as you saw in that other video, the settling process doesn't take very long. We're able to keep this part of the cycle very short, which gives us more time for treatment. And this is also when we'll take the opportunity to waste out any extra or undesirable sludge out of the system, because as the process carries on, it's going to continue to produce new biological sludge. And so to keep that from getting excessive, we waste it every cycle. Okay, we can move on to the next slide, please. This is some information that was taken from some work done by the consulting engineer Carollo back in 2016. They did a paper that was comparing several different conventional and innovative processes in a case study. Basically, they took 3 paper studies of theoretical wastewater treatment plants. They designed them around different technologies and compared them. What you see here is a comparison of footprint. So the one on the far left, it says BNR, biological and nutrient removal. That would be your conventional type plant where it's a flow-through plant, a continuous process, and it's probably one of the more common types of processes that are used around the country. It also is the most footprint intensive. It takes up the most space because it has all these different tanks and zones. You need to have large clarifier tanks to settle out the sludge. So it takes up the most space. There's a lot of other technologies in between there that use different quirks of process to make that footprint smaller, batching reactors or different types of processes that use some type of outside aid to make the sludge settle faster. But in terms of really minimizing the footprint, the smallest ones, the smallest technologies are typically MBR or membrane reactor. Okay, is that a scheduled one? Okay, a membrane bioreactor, which allows for more concentrated treatment by using membranes to filter out the water, and then aerobic granular sludge. They're both about comparable in terms of footprint, and both of them are considerably smaller than a typical conventional plant. Next slide. This is an example of the Foley plant in Alabama, which is where we've built one of our systems. And our part of it is on the left side there, the 3 tanks that are on the left side. The existing plant that this replaced is on the right side. If you could go to the next slide, please. So the previous plant was designed around 2 million gallons per day of treatment capacity. The original plan was to add another 1 million gallons per day of capacity with that little bit of space on the left. But then they decided to go with the Narita process instead, which actually allows them to do 3.5 total million gallons per day of treatment just in that left side of the space alone. They're now able to reclaim that entire space on the right side. They don't need it anymore. And so if that plant does need to grow beyond 3.5 million gallons per day, they now have the space to do that. Another key benefit is energy consumption. This is another area where the aerobic granular sludge process typically does pretty well, mostly due to the fact that it has reduced mechanical equipment compared to other processes because there's not as many tanks, there's not as many pumps, not as many moving parts. Also, it has some benefits to aeration efficiency as well compared to other processes. So, in terms of putting it all together, total life cycle costs, that includes the installed cost of actually building the plant and all of the operating expenses over 20 years. At least as a result of this particular study, which again was a paper study from 5 years ago, came out to be 50% better than the most expensive option, which was an MBR. So in summary, it's a relatively new process that uses innovative technology to provide a lot of significant potential benefits for, particularly for new plants or upgrades to existing plants by saving space and increasing your capacity in a given area. And our experience in North America at this point is pretty solid, with five installations up right now and another 5 that are in the process of being built currently, and then another 20 or so that are a few more years out. We've got a pretty solid experience base here in North America, and then also another 60 or so plants operating elsewhere around the world. So with that, I'm going to finish my part of it. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Okay, so I'll just do it from left to right. You go first, Greg.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
First of all, how does this technology differ from the conventional method of anaerobic digestion?
So anaerobic digestion is typically aimed at treating the sludge part of it, not the wastewater. So you'd see that and pair it up with another process, like another wastewater treatment process. We can actually use aerobic granular sludge along with anaerobic digestion, so they're not incompatible technologies.
And then my second question is, can you address the issue or potential issue of smells?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is actually a question that we do get fairly frequently, is how is the technology on odor? Generally, odor is not a major issue for this process. Typically, you're going to see odor be a problem in the kind of the upfront parts of the plant, the primary parts of the plant where raw wastewater is coming in. So your screens and headworks, and if you have primary clarification, those can have odor issues. When it moves on to the next step, a lot of times you're not going to have very strong odor issues. We haven't experienced it at our facility in Rockford. You can be right on top of the tank, and it's a light earthy smell, but it's not really what you would consider to be an unpleasant smell, and it doesn't persist beyond the immediate vicinity of the reactor. There are installations right in the middle of heavy urban areas right next to people's homes, and those are facilities where they don't even have any type of odor control of any type on the reactors themselves. Thank you.
It's your turn, Lisa.
Thank you for speaking with us.
Oh, the microphone.
Thanks for being here and speaking with us. I'm curious about if you have any general idea of cost comparisons between both construction of the different types, conventional versus this system, and then operational costs.
Absolutely. So in terms of the costs, and this can vary depending on the size and the scale of the plant, but in our experience, what we found is that compared to conventional processes, we tend to be more expensive on the equipment side, as in the part that we're supplying the equipment. But when you look at the total installed cost to build one of these plants, in most cases, in our experience, after a full comparison, like a full evaluation has been done, generally we end up being relatively favorable in most cases. And these are evaluations that are typically not done by us, but done by consulting engineers that are doing work for technology evaluations for their clients. In terms of operating expenses, again, generally we're going to be on the better side for that because we have a lot less mechanical equipment that's involved. So like we don't have a lot of large pumps that are operating. We don't have mechanical mixers that are operating 24 hours a day. And so with fewer motorized equipment associated with the process and a little bit better efficiency on our aeration system, overall we tend to use less power and we have less mechanical maintenance involved.
Thank you.
Anything else? How is this process for process stability compared to the other more common processes in the U.S.?
In my experience, the process stability is one of the strong points for this process, primarily because of the nature of the granule sludge. There's probably the most challenging part of it is getting it started. That takes a period of creating the granules from conventional sludge, which we call granulation, and that's a process that can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Although it does treat the wastewater while it's in the process of doing that. And then once you have the granules, then you can increase the capacity of the plant, essentially. Once you have the granules formed, they tend to be very resilient and very, very difficult to get rid of, essentially. They're pretty strong against a lot of adverse conditions and things that can affect a wastewater plant, like if you have variation in your load, or if you have inhibitory substances or bad things coming into your wastewater from wherever they might come from. I'm not sure what you guys see at your plant here, but my understanding is you have some dairy contributors and some agricultural contributors that can cause some problems. We do have a few installations worldwide that do treat dairy waste as well.
Initially, when I heard about this relatively new technology, it's like, new technology, let it develop first. So what kind of comfort level can you give me on that, including, you mentioned, performance guarantees?
We fully back the technology. All of our installations to date have a full process performance guarantee, so we will work with the engineer to determine what the requirements for that are, but basically we'll guarantee whatever level of effluent quality is required, generally required for your discharge permit, but we've also guaranteed quality beyond that for some plants if they need that. And that would remain in effect for typically for a year from the point that it's fully started up and operational. And if we're unable to meet that the terms of that guarantee, then we're basically on the hook for replacing that technology. So we can do that with just a simple guarantee. We've done bonding where we actually put up all the money for a full replacement of the technology. Just about anything. We're quite confident in the technology's ability.
Thank you.
So go back to the process. So this is very new for me, but these granular modules, you just put them in the tank and then you put the sewage in, correct? Can you go back to that video again?
Sure. Can we get the slides back up?
I'm sorry.
No problem, but I can explain
Oh,
what
well, okay,
we're working on that. Where
would you get those at? I mean, from you?
You buy them in a store.
Let's not worry about
That's another key
supply
part
chain. Every once in a while, we have issues with road salt.
That's another key part of the process, is that you don't have to get that from us. The granules, it's the process that forms them. So we supply all of the equipment that's necessary to create granules inside your tank with your
Okay.
wastewater.
Oh, okay.
You would start it up with conventional sludge that comes from any plant that's nearby. Any wastewater plant would have some sludge that you can get.
So we would use their waste product to start this process, their sludge?
Yeah, just the sludge that's already being used in another plant.
Our sludge?
Your sludge, yeah,
Okay,
and your
all right.
existing process would work as well. And that, we would call that seed. So we put it in the tank to
Right.
begin with, and then over time, if you apply the process over time, it turns that normal sludge into granular sludge.
But much quicker, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what's the magic ingredient that makes it granular?
It's not an ingredient, it's the process, it's how we feed the tank, and it's how we get rid of the certain types of sludge we don't want.
So it's the equipment that does all the magic, not some magic chemical you invented.
Right, it's the equipment and then the process and the controls. So the equipment and then how you operate it. There's no outside substance or anything. You don't need to get stuff from us to keep it going.
All right.
In fact, eventually you would end up with a surplus of granules, and you might have people asking for your granules to start up another plant someday if you had one. That's kind of what we're facing right now.
Okay. Now, how about, Bill, do you have anything to add, or you want to come up there?
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add. We went down to Rockford, we took a look at the plant, it was pretty impressive. Kind of what you see, I mean, it's so simple. That's what was impressive
Right,
about it. It
it's-
was very simple, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I was a little bit afraid of the new technology too, but it's kind of there's some new technology, but it's based on pretty much an SBR almost, which is kind of older technology, really, to be honest with you. So it's not like it's something just totally new out of the blue. And I went online and I looked at it, researched it a little bit in Europe, and I guess it kind of set my mind at ease looking at it. It seems like it's pretty stable, pretty solid technology, and they're willing to stand behind it. I mean, my first opinion was we should maybe do some of the pilot, but that's somewhat cost prohibitive. If they're going to give you the performance guarantee, I think you have to decide, do you want to spend the money on a pilot if they're going to guarantee it's going to work anyway? So I guess that's my 2 cents on it.
Right. Then what Lisa mentioned, the financials too, right? I'm assuming we'll have a comparison of the other options, like upfront costs and all that?
Yeah,
Or,
We already saw
Well,
some of
Travis
that.
is
or
going
saw
up.
some of it, yeah.
Yeah, well, Travis is going up. I mean, this is an initial discussion.
Right,
If you think
yeah.
it's worthwhile, then
Oh,
absolutely.
no, not, we don't need to dig into financials now. I mean, this is, I need to digest this because this is my first time seeing this.
Good pun.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll definitely do side by side and make sure all that gets fleshed out pretty well. Go ahead, Travis.
I would just add that in the wastewater treatment plant discharge options memo that was prepared for the city last fall, there were cost comparisons between the various alternatives, and that included the 3 technologies that were shortlisted, which were the oxidation ditch, which is what the city currently uses, conventional biological nutrient removal, which Brett touched on in this presentation, and then the Aqua process. So if you look back at that memo, you can see the planning level comparison there.
So the Foley, Alabama plant, is that an oxidation ditch plant?
Sorry, yes, it was an oxidation ditch plant, yes.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question, maybe both Brett and Bill would have.
Oh, the microphone again.
Maybe both Brett and Bill would have a thought on this. I'm curious about how this, what kind of biosolids result, or, is there any difference in the concentration, the volume, or how you'd have to deal with land spreading?
Absolutely, yeah. So essentially, it's the same type of process as a conventional process. So you're going to get similar amounts of biosolids resulting, and the treatment for that is similar, so you would use the same processes for that. The only difference that there is with aerobic granular sludge is that what we're removing from the reactor here is dilute compared to what it would be with a conventional process. So we usually do recommend one extra sub-step of thickening that before it goes on to your solids handling processes. And that's typically going to be included with the equipment that we propose and provide. So that would have been included in their evaluation as well.
Go ahead, Greg.
I have a question on that plant in Alabama. Are you able to share any of the costs before and after of how that city or municipality adjusted to that technology, sort of like a before and after type situation from a financial standpoint?
We do have, we actually worked with them on an energy analysis where they went through and compared the energy consumption of their plant before and after the upgrade. I think we have a paper or something like that on that. I can look into that and provide that information. I don't have detailed financials for them, but there might be some information that we can provide. Certainly on the energy aspect, we do have some information.
Brett, in your experience, would that be something that some of these cities would be willing to share with us? I know you mentioned you're just starting one in Kansas City. Do you think they'd be open to sharing what their costs are?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Certainly, you'd be free to ask them, and they'd be free to provide whatever information they can. All of the plant operators for currently operating plants, we can arrange phone calls, meetings, visits, with or without our presence is fine. We're happy to set you up with those people.
I'll just mention here, one of the things we did discuss, both with Brett, and that's Paul over there on the end, but is either an actual tour to Rockford or a virtual tour where we could ask the operators these very questions, what their experience has been, that sort of thing. If I may, I'm going to ask one question now. The reason you guys are here is that when we did go down and view the operation, it was pretty impressive, and almost to the point of, hey, this is too good to be true.
That's
So-
what I thought too.
So what, are there downsides, Brett, or are there issues that we should be aware of?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not magic technology, so it's going to be subject to all of the things you have to look out for any conventional plant, because at the end of the day, it's the same biology and it's the same type of principles for treating wastewater. So you do need to operate it correctly, like you would any other plant. There's reduced mechanical equipment, but there's a lot of electrically actuated valves, for example. So if you have potential for maintenance issues there that you just have to keep an eye on. Generally, I would say it probably shakes out better overall for granular sludge, but it's got the same concerns and the same issues that you would have in any other technology. We just try to mitigate them and improve. But I'm sure the gentleman at Strand would also be able to give you their opinions on that in a more objective way.
No, that's good. So, two other questions real quick. I think you mentioned when you did the presentation before, is that the DNR is familiar with this and they're comfortable with the technology?
We haven't spoken directly with the Wisconsin DNR as of yet, because typically we don't go to them and directly ourselves. It comes up if a project comes up. We have, however, worked with the regulatory bodies from many other states, particularly states in this area, including Michigan. Their body is EGLE. We've worked with Illinois to some degree. We worked with, obviously we've received approval in all the states where we're operating, so Kansas, Colorado, and some of those states have very stringent regulatory requirements. We have to go through a pretty rigorous approval process, particularly Colorado. Montana was pretty rigorous. Many of those states adhere to the 10-state standards, which are largely applicable here as well. So our technology is capable of meeting all of those standards, and generally we haven't had a problem getting regulatory approval. We have significant data to back up the technology. We have the ability to pilot if needed. We're willing to do bonding on projects if that's a requirement. So I don't anticipate a problem, but we haven't spoken with them directly yet.
Sure, but I guess you would help kind of shepherd this through their process to...
Absolutely,
Sure,
yeah.
okay.
Any information that a regulatory body requires for their approval process, we're prepared to provide it.
Okay. So my last question, standing behind you there, is Bill. Now, Bill is a longtime conventional plant operator. Can he learn how to operate this new plant?
I have full faith in him, yeah. Of course, everybody that's operating a Narita currently was operating some type of conventional process beforehand. Actually, the guy who's now about to be taking over the plant at Whitefish, he's a brand new operator. He's still in training, but he's only been at the plant there for about a year, and he's already pretty comfortable with it as well. So again, we're happy to set up meetings with operators as well to get their insight. We actually just had an operators forum event where we invited all of the operators from all the current plants and some from a couple upcoming plants down to the Foley plant for a few days. And basically they got together and shared information, and that was really successful. So that's something that we're going to continue to do probably on a yearly basis, and continue to invite current and future operators to go down and exchange information. So that's another resource that's available.
I have a question more for Strand or city administration. With this technology taking significantly, like maybe 1/4 of the space as other technologies, is there any consideration of using the existing site?
A lot of the reasons that were discussed with the siting evaluation were related to the more stringent limits that were going to be imposed at the current facility and the long-term costs associated with that.
Yeah.
And this would wouldn't necessarily address that concern.
But those can be addressed by piping the effluent rather than influent.
For some of the concerns, there would be some anti-backsliding that would not be allowed. So the least stringent effluent limits were
Yes.
we're going to be moving the plant, and then also there were several other non-monetary factors as well, just as far as proximity to residences and all that, and of course you're aware of those as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in, Mark, that there's a number of criteria involved in the siting. Yeah, the footprint is really attractive. You know, we're looking at maybe multi-purpose a site if possible. And then we're also looking at a location that might fit better into what we anticipate will be city growth, that sort of thing. So believe me, that was discussed, and that was one of the attractive things, is that it is a smaller footprint. I don't know that we've spent a lot of time really identifying if it would fit in that particular area. You know, based on our discussion tonight, that might be something we will pursue a little harder. And I'm talking about when we go into closed session.
I'm sure it would be the most cost-effective solution.
Yeah, and I guess maybe that you bring me right to what I guess would be my final point. We're bringing this to you for two reasons. One is it's a new technology, and if we're going to build a new plant, let's stay up to date as much as we possibly can. And if there are some cost savings both in the construction phase and in the operation phase, absolutely we want to look at this. And I know, Brett was pretty confident, but until we get into it, we won't know that. So I guess as much as anything, what we're looking for tonight is some kind of an indication to proceed with looking at this technology, start fleshing out some more of the detail. It'll dovetail into our discussion later tonight on siting. There's a lot of balls in the air right now, and so we want to make sure everybody's helping catch them. Okay.
Thumbs up for me.
Yeah, me too. So, I mean, obviously the financials need to be looked at further, but.
I would agree. I think the smaller footprint is a big draw, and the fact that, staff are impressed by it and feel like that's a workable technology. I think that speaks well for it.
I like it.
All right.
I'm for continuing and keeping it on the table for side-by-side comparisons.
All right. So Travis, is there anything else that you want in terms of next steps and how we proceed? Obviously, we'll stay in touch with Brett and Paul and.
I guess I just want to confirm that we do not want to. Just want to confirm that we do not want to proceed with piloting the technology, that with the performance guarantee and with further investigation and site visits and talking with other operators, that's how the city would like to proceed at this point?
Yeah, and just real quick background, Brett and Paul were kind enough to give us a couple of options as to what it would take to pilot, as he mentioned. They are costly. In the overall scheme of things, it was a drop in the bucket, if you will, but it's also real money. And so I guess if you guys are comfortable and you guys are comfortable with walking through it as a paper exercise right now, and if, obviously if we give more information to Brett and Paul about what our influent is right now and all that sort of thing, and if we run into a hiccup, then maybe we will have to pilot. But otherwise, if we can do it as a paper exercise, that's probably acceptable for now. Does that help you out? Okay.
All right.
Thanks again, you
Yeah.
guys,
Thanks, guys.
for coming up. And Brett, I go to the Beloit Farmers Market every Saturday, so I expect to see you there.
Okay, I was there last Saturday.
Oh. There you go.
All right, if no more further questions or comments, we'll go to agenda item 8, discussion recommendation on 2023 street maintenance projects. We have a prepared motion 22-81. I will entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve motion 22-8-1 by Mark.
I'll second that.
That's second by Lisa. So, we last delayed our last program because Dwayne thought he could get federal grant money. Is that correct? Is this a continuation of it, or how many hours just that you take over?
Correct. It is a continuation of we annually have this discussion in August. And it's a continuation of some of the work that was done in March as part of the bill funding. And then also the reapplication of the bill funding, because the first round we didn't receive funding. We then reapplied for a portion of that in early June, and we still haven't heard the results of that.
Oh, okay.
But we tried to incorporate two plans for this 2-year maintenance program into this one single plan that we're going to talk about today. I wanted to start out with maybe just a little bit of revisit of our maintenance plan. I know many of you are familiar with what we do, but I thought it'd be important to just kind of talk about the success of this program and how well it's working. I'll try to go quickly through some of these slides, a lot of information. Currently, on these slides, if it's in parentheses, that was from 2016. And 2016 was when we really got into this program. We went through a number of work sessions and developed it. But currently, we're at 35.5 miles. Of that, about 2 miles is county road. Note that 2 miles of Main Street, 89, is not included in those numbers. We do not rate those, and we do not control those portions. So currently, we are maintaining, physically maintaining 33.5 miles. While some of the county, the DOT work we do, obviously we did a concrete patch on a storm manhole this last week. We do some maintenance, but as far as the asphalt maintenance program, it's 33.5 miles. Again, back to February of 16, this is basically our rating system, and just some background information on what that is. There's probably more detail that I don't need to go over right now, but basically from a 10 is an excellent road and a 1 is a failed street. Typically when we're talking about maintenance, or so some quick things, a new street is 10, a mill and overlay is a 9, anything that we chip seal goes back to an 8, and we are looking at typically chip sealing between 4 and 8s, and then reconstructing anything that falls into that 1 to 3 category. A little history, and this was the history in 2016, and we were looking at ratings overall of our PACER ratings in the 5 range. As of 2022, our overall PACER rating by length is at a 7. And probably the next slide, please, Dave, thank you, probably shows it clearer for me, maybe not for everyone, but on the left side is 2016 PACER ratings by area, and 2022 is on the right. Each color coincides with a rating. I know it's a little far away to see, but in general, in 2016, 50% of the ratings were 6 or lower, and now really there's only about, in that 1 to 5 range, we're under 15% of the streets in the city. So I think you can see a pretty significant benefit of the funds that have been used for maintenance alone, set aside from the reconstructions. This slide was just the basis of some of the work we did in 2016. Probably not needed to go in detail into that, but some of the funding that kind of then established the next slide, which is a 6-year, one back please, Dave, thank you, which established at that time our 60-year life cycle analysis. And just to revisit this real quickly, if we let all the streets just deteriorate to the point where we're reconstructing, we need about $2.5 million a year to just stay on pace. If we're doing some type of maintenance at some interval, and in this case, we looked at 2 different intervals in 2016, and we were looking at 1.2 to 1.4 million per year in order to keep that maintenance up at either a 5-year or a 6-year period. If you recall, we've decided on that 7-year as a group with the Public Works Board, and we've been attacking these streets maintenance with a 7-year cycle. Moving on to the next slide, Dave. Reiterated a little bit of what I said before, but we're on a 7-year rotation. Some of the ratings that we have and that we use and different types of maintenance activities, which I think you're all familiar with. And then our general, although we look at it each year, generally we're looking at 2 to 3 times of chip seal cycles, and then we're looking at a 2-inch mill and overlay cycle. And at some point, reconstruction. Typically that then means our first mill and overlay year may fall between 21 and 28 if the street is in need of that. And so when we get to the spreadsheet in a little while, we'll be talking about the 28-year period. Next slide, please. So, bear with me. Again, I apologize. I think this slide, in order to stay on a maintenance schedule, we're looking at a 14% of the streets require maintenance. A little information, a lot of numbers here. But to stay on a 1-year average of 2.5 miles is about $500,000. Approximately, we're running at about a 13-year maintenance pace. And then the last slide, just some budget history of what we've spent on the maintenance since that time frame. As you can see, we talked about it quite a bit in increasing that in 2016. You will see that we will have a pretty large slug hitting us in 2024 and 2025 because we did ramp up the budget in 17 and 18 based on this analysis. But over the 8-year period, we're averaging about $500,000 in this project cycle. Recently, I believe this year we're at $250,000, and the proposed 2023 budget is currently at $300,000. There has been some reserve account, meaning, for example, this year we have not yet spent the $250,000 because of the bill funding and because we've held off. But in previous years, we've had the same thing, and there's actually a reserve account of just under $300,000. So available funds currently, assuming that we're looking at a program of 22 and 23, of course, 23 budget has not been approved yet. If that $300,000 stays in the budget, then the available funds would be $747,000.
For 2 years?
For 2 years.
Okay.
Correct. The spreadsheet that we'll jump into after this presentation shows you 2 different options. One is the opinion of cost without the bill funding. Let's say we find out in the next couple of months that we didn't get the bill funding. Then we would proceed with what's going to be yellow on the sheet, and we're looking at about a $380,000 cost expense, and we're probably doing a lot more chip seal. If we do get the bill funding, and the bill funding is for mill and overlay on quite a few of the streets in the Brookstone subdivision, then we'd be looking at the 540 number. So in both cases, we're under the 747, but I want to make sure it's clear that if you take the 154 the 154 that's left in the 300,000, we're not quite covering the 380 or the 540. So we will be dipping into that reserve account in order to cover these two totals. Actually, not both totals, just the bill funding total. My apologies. Yes.
Dwayne, can you explain that opinion of cost with or without the bill funding? Again, that's counterintuitive to me that it costs us less if we don't get state funding than it would cost us if we do. So I wasn't tracking that.
Sure. A good point. So, Dave, can we go to the spreadsheet, please? No, there should be a spreadsheet PDF that was in the packet for that same item.
Is it the one called maintenance plan?
Second one, to go maintenance plan, the PDF, you said?
Yes, of the maintenance plan, yes.
It must be the second one. That one's a spreadsheet. I see a huge spreadsheet.
There's two spreadsheets. One's a capital, right?
Yes, so this is the maintenance spreadsheet.
Oh, this is a maintenance spreadsheet.
So to answer Lisa's question, so in the far left side of that spreadsheet, we give 3 different prices. Thanks, Dave. That's the one.
Which document is this?
No,
in our
actually,
package?
Dave, it is the other one. It'll be in the other item.
Agenda
Same-
9? You talking about
Should be agenda 8, right?
8? Which one is it? The maintenance plan?
It's the maintenance plan.
All right.
I just sent it to him. Now he'll pull it up.
All right.
Or I sent it to him this afternoon.
Yes.
That's it. Thank you.
That's the one?
So this is a listing of all the streets that are 5 to 8 that meet that maintenance plan, chip seal, or mill and overlay criteria, and are 2022 or 2023, 7 years prior, which would be 2015 and 2016. These are all the streets that are capable at this time. On the far left side, we've got 3 different columns. One is for a chip seal cost, one is for a mill and overlay cost, and one is for a pulverization. And I believe on the bottom, on the far left side, there's a chip seal cost at $2 a square yard, a mill and overlay cost at $20 a square yard, and a pulverize at $40 per square yard. The answer to your question then, Lisa, is if in the bill funding, even though we're getting an 80-20 split on funding and we're getting that 80%, we are actually jumping then from the $2 per square yard to the $20 per square yard cost. But we are moving up that maintenance from a chip seal to a mill and overlay. And so that we're extending that life of that street.
So if we get a grant, we're going to do the more expensive mill and overlay?
Correct.
Okay.
Because that's a requirement of the funding, or?
Yes.
Okay.
And a little clearer then, there's a column, about 5 columns, or 5 columns in, there's a yes and no column. And much of the top of the list is not. But if it is yes, that is, it was included in the funding application and the reapplication. The other thing that I did was, so in the first number, everywhere where the highlighting is, that was pulled over into the 2023 maintenance estimate that totaled into 380. And that would be the column just left of the yeses and no, the yeses. And then to be accurate, there will be some costs. It's not just an 80-20 split on the bill funding. If you recall, we had the discussion in March that handicap ramps would be required pre-construction. So when I put the totals together, you'll notice next to the yeses, I said mill and overlay 40%. I'm estimating that we'll still have a 40% cost rather than a 20% cost. And so that 504 is based on that number. And so if you look at the column then to the right of the M&O, I'm using chip seal, or if it's in the funding, and that comes down to a total on the bottom in orange of 504,000. And so those are those 2 alternates that we talked about in the presentation.
That helps, thank you.
Yes. Sorry for the long explanation, but there's a lot of information packed in this spreadsheet. Go ahead.
So, I know we're trying to touch between 14 and 15% of the streets.
Your microphone, Greg.
We're trying to touch between 14 and 15% of the streets each year. Are you having any issues with mileage or that percentage being reached with inflation? Are you having to adjust that, and that $2 a square foot square yard that you're using, does that have to be adjusted as well, or how are you factoring inflation into these 2023 plans?
We have not increased them for the 2023 plans. I have been in contact, the county will be doing, we'll talk about that in a minute. The county will be doing our 2022 program, possibly in the next 2 weeks. And I've been told, at least from the county, that the prices should be reasonable, the same as last year. However, in next year's program, they are concerned that some of the oil prices or some of the prices may go up. But they're pretty confident that the numbers will be very similar to last year for 2022. And on the chip seal side, actually, we've come in under 2 in the last couple of years. So it is a conservative $2 a square yard price.
Thank you.
You're welcome. One other note on this spreadsheet is the far right side, and that has some yellow in it. That is years since a major surface rehab. And so as you're looking at that, we mentioned earlier that typically when we get to that 26 to 28 year time frame, we're probably getting close to that decision between a chip seal and a mill and overlay. And you'll note that I believe I highlighted everything higher than 26 years. And much of those yellows are in the bill funding that was applied for, except for the ones that are on the in the new portion in the 2016 area. However, even though they're 26 years out, the maintenance plan has been working, and we're still at a 7 rating, and I wouldn't recommend a mill and overlay at a 7 rating. With that, Dave, could you pull up, let's look at the 3 first maps that relate to this spreadsheet. They would have been in the packet. If not, we can discuss them.
I can see, I can bring it up here.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
we've got them.
we can look at it. So there's the Brookstone one, you got map number 2, map number 3.
Correct. Well, so let's, Dave, you can keep that on the screen for now. In your packet, there are 3 maps.
Right.
That kind of coincide with the spreadsheet we just looked at. That covers that 2-year program. The map that Dave is presenting or is showing us right now is what we forwarded to Jefferson County this afternoon. It is a tentative list of streets that we've determined that could be chip sealed yet this fall or this month. There's 2 colors there. One is, so what we're making the assumption is that we're moving ahead with this plan and that we're taking some of the 22 money to spend over this 2-year plan on streets that we feel probably would be beneficial just to stay as a chip seal. And other impacts we looked at were those streets that really had steep handicap ramps and would be very costly to replace those handicap ramps that are actually functioning properly, just not to meet the federal standard for the funding. In particular, let's say Crestview from Stonehenge, and you'll notice there's some streets that are on the steeper side. That's where that issue will come in. So what we're proposing there is to do chip seal yet this year on some of those streets. So I'm kind of asking 2 different questions. I'm asking what was in the packet is the 2-year plan, and then at the same time presenting what we're looking at doing as part of that plan or the portion of that plan that we will do in August.
For this year.
For this year. And note that some of these streets are in the new list that we just created.
Oh, okay.
For example, Tamarack was not in the 22 plan because it was last chip sealed in 2016. So we're proposing to chip seal Tamarack in a 6-year cycle this time because it doesn't necessarily affect the bill funding on that street. It probably qualifies, it's not going to qualify for a mill and overlay in the next 24 months or 12 months. So we're saying, let's provide it to the list for the county for this year. The reason we have 2 different colors on that map is we are the only municipality, and including the county, that the county is doing chip seals for this year. So what we've worked with them about is trying to give them a list that they will work 1 full day or 2 full days, and they will at least do all the ones that are in yellow, and then finish out a day in anything that's in red. So I'm going to open it up to questions. If there's any maps that you want us to bring up or Dave to bring up, just let me know.
So what was the point of the Brookstone map and map 2 and 3 then? So if that's this year's plan, these other plans in our docket will be if we get the grant, is what you're saying.
If we get the grant and it's in green, we will
Okay.
do them as a mill and overlay. However, if we chip seal a couple of those on this one that's on the screen,
Right,
then of course we'll drop it from the funding.
okay,
And the reason for that is potentially that we will reduce the amount of handicap ramp costs. That would affect that 40% estimate.
Since that map isn't on the website, I can't read it, so those streets are on the east side, those are,
On the, for
It's
the,
also,
there,
this is kind of the same of Brookstone map, but just with different colors
Oh,
for which
okay.
streets are going to be done, right?
oh, all right, that's Brookstone, okay.
so I'm further breaking down, so the map that was in the packet
Oh.
is the 2 years, the 2-year approach.
All right,
The map that's on the screen that you're looking at is what we think we'll be doing in about 2.5 to 3 weeks.
okay, all
So-
right.
So just for a point of clarification, then, what are we, I mean, our motion is to recommend 2023 street maintenance, so is this, like what you're showing us that the county might be doing has already been approved by the board and the council, and so that doesn't really need approval, but it affects next year's plan? What needs approval?
So there,
I guess
I'm a
maybe
little
that's the
confused too,
question.
Lisa.
so that's my question tonight to you. You've approved already a plan,
Based on not getting funding. 'cause you
not
weren't
getting
quite
funding,
sure.
and that we were going to combine 2 years. You've already provided funding in the 22 budget to do maintenance in these areas. What I'm asking is, and we're talking about approving it, in March, we talked about approving it as a 2-year approach. What I'm asking is, are we allowed then to spend some of the $22 to attack the 2-year program, but maybe get into some of the ones that would have been as part of the 23 project?
So this is gonna be part of the plan, no matter what, if we get the grant, and you want permission just to go ahead and do that, because it's a given
Yes,
to do this.
that's the approach I'm taking.
That makes sense. How about you, Lisa?
Well, again, I'm just trying to think, what did we already approve and what maybe needs approval as an amendment for 2022, or maybe it doesn't. I just want to make sure we're, following all the right steps, and does the council need to approve this as well? Because if you're going to do this work in August, I think that's already, that's already been arranged, right, with the county?
Yes.
Work has been arranged, but we can change the map. If we want to go, if you want us to only look at ones that were originally on the 22 list, we can go back and send them a new map tomorrow. We can propose to provide, depending on your discussion tonight, this potentially could go to council next week. I'm not saying.
So the motion is to approve that.
The motion is real, I probably shouldn't have brought that map up. The motion is to approve the 2-year program.
Right,
But I was trying to say, we're looking at a portion of the 2-year program with this year's chip seal program.
so is anybody opposed to the chip seal that Dwayne has mentioned for August? I'm not opposed.
So the spreadsheet is essentially what you're asking us to approve, right?
Yeah.
And that still is a
Two-year program.
two-year plan.
Yeah, okay.
I look at it as the details may change based upon, what's happening and what's, how things
Yeah.
play out, and I'm,
Things change so much, so.
I'm not concerned about the details, I'm just happy to see the overall.
Right, the overall plan.
Yeah, and Dwayne, just making eye contact about that. There are so many variables right now And, I guess what we're trying to do is just make sure you understand the direction that we're trying to go here.
Right.
And get an idea for the dollars that are involved. You're going to see when we get into the capital one, same type of deal. I mean, in some cases, equipment and that sort of thing is 2 years out, yet we're going to try to budget for it this year. So it's a moving target, but I think you all understand now, we're trying to get you a general understanding of what's happening and how much things are going to cost, and it's going to change. And so we'll just keep coming back to you and double checking.
All right.
And I think it's good to be flexible on what, flexible and not just saying it must be 7 years, but okay, this one's 6, this one's 8. That's a good thing.
And I think we'll be running into that more after this 2-year cycle. Because we'll be hitting that $1 million jump. There will be so many more options that we'll be looking at. So, any other questions?
Questions, comments, concerns?
Again, I just want to make sure the motion does what you want it to do. Because the motion says 2023, and that's all it really talks about. And so I want to make sure that if we're approving something for both years, that we're saying that, or recommending approval, that we're saying that clearly enough to make sure that it's what you need.
Perhaps, and I hope I don't muddy the waters more, obviously the 22 has already been approved, but what we do has an effect on next year. So from a budget standpoint, which is really what we're trying to establish here, we are looking for recommendation for the 23 budget.
Okay.
Okay. And that's how the motion reads.
Yes.
So was there anything that you're asking us to approve to do this year that we didn't already approve for this year?
I think they offered us the option of changing what's being done this year, but not as far as a budget approval process.
The budget approval for the
2022 is complete.
Has been complete, and we've actually dynamically changed it several times since last August because of the bill funding. I think we do that on a regular basis every year in any case, because when we do get to this point where we're doing chip seal, we do a final look and say, should we be doing a chip seal, or has it deteriorated that much in the last 6 months that we should be changing it to a mill and overlay? So I think staff is making that decision on a regular basis before we move ahead as a final. But I think I agree with Paul that the 22 budget was already approved. We are just looking then to say this $300,000 that is in the proposed budget will allow us to do this plan as much as possible. But as we get into each one, we might find that we don't get through all of this list because many of the streets will deteriorate through the winter, and in 23, maybe more of them require a mill and overlay. Does that help?
So maybe another way of saying it is we would be recommending approval of this 2023 plan so that it can be incorporated, and the $300,000, so that that can be incorporated into the city budget. And then, once you get into 2023, it sounds like you're saying, then see what the roads really look like and you adjust accordingly, which is what it sounds like you're doing now for this year.
Correct.
Okay, so I think you hit it on the head, Mark. It's kind of like, these are the details that maybe we don't have to worry so much about, but it's good to know, what's happening.
We have a meeting for every detail change every week.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right. So everyone understand the motion? So any more questions, discussion?
Was there anything from the city attorney? Do we need to
All right.
change anything? Okay.
All right. So roll call vote, please.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Polachek,
Aye.
Mr. Picard,
Aye.
Mr. Temperley.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right, agenda item 9, discussion and recommendation on 2023 capital improvement projects. Once again, we have a prepared motion, 22-8-2. I'll entertain a motion to approve in a second.
Motion to approve motion 22-8-2 by Mark.
Second.
That was Greg. All right, we're in discussion phase. So Dwayne.
So a little shorter presentation this time, hopefully. The first slide, next slide, please, Dave, is very familiar. You've seen that already, 35.5, and we're maintaining 33 miles. Now we're talking about CIP program. So we are talking about streets that are in that 1 to 3 rating, meaning we're reconstructing. Next slide, please. In order to stay on that 60-year life cycle, if we replace 1/60th of that every year, we're looking at 1.7%, or just over a half a mile, or 2,900 lineal feet per year, in order to maintain the system or the 60-year program to stay on schedule. Again, I just mentioned we're looking at the 1 to 3s. And Dave, next slide. The next slide really took the information we provided in the capital improvement plan, and that is each of the streets that are proposed for the next 6 or 7 years, and the corresponding length of street that would be reconstructed. You'll note, can you go back one slide, Dave, please? You'll note that there are a number of asterisks there. We did apply for bill funding for South CP Avenue, North CP Avenue, and Westlake Park Place. Again, those projects are contingent on that funding, and that length is contingent on that funding. That one, please back, Dave, thank you. A 1-year average on all of those projects. So our current capital improvement plan means that we're averaging a little less than 2,000 lineal feet over those 7 years. We're really running through the CIP right now. We're running at about an 89-year maintenance pace, so we are falling slightly behind. But there are a number of streets that are in the CIP, and the dollars, as Paul will show, there are dollars associated with each of these projects, but realize that overall, we're not maintaining at a 60-year pace. That is basically what we're going to do for the next 2 or 3 slides. The next one talks about water main length. Paul has mentioned in his presentation that there's 42 miles. We've used the 80-year life cycle. In that case, for the water main, that's 1.2%, or again, about a half a mile, or 2,700 lineal feet per year to maintain that 80-year program schedule. Next slide, please. Again, we give the list of all of the streets that are in the CIP. Note the bill funding again, but also note that we have added Owen Street in 2024 for water main, and Grove Street in 2028 for those water main replacements in areas where continued water main breaks have been happening. The single-year average over that time frame is just under 2,100 lineal feet, and again, we are falling behind that 80-year pace, and that pace is at 107 currently as the CIP stands. Moving on to sewer. Same type of analysis. Time we're looking at an 80 to 100-year life cycle, 1 to 1.2%. Again, somewhere between 2,300 and 2,900 to stay on that 80 to 100-year program schedule. Next slide, Dave, please. Thank you. Same approach here. No new projects on the sewer at this time on this list. Again, we're falling behind, 117-year pace. I presented these 3 kind of analysis to try to present, as we're talking about whether we should move, whether should we delete, what we are currently sitting at, and if you start deleting projects from this list, we're just extending the amount that we're falling behind. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Paul.
Okay, I mean, this is all really good information. Dwayne works really hard at this. I appreciate it. The only comments I'll make is that what we're doing now, back up, we know we're coming into some tough budget years, absolutely. Now, in regard to water and sewer, obviously that's not on the tax rolls, but it is still a cost that people are going to have to absorb. I know that no city is keeping up on their maintenance program. It's just financially impossible. So what we're doing, as much as anything, as Dwayne pointed out, is looking at streets that we're constantly having to repair now. And I will say that that's really not a good way to go about this. Certainly it gets rid of putting a new main 5 feet at a time because you're repairing leaks. But what's going to happen, obviously, is we'll start springing leaks somewhere else. And I hate to say it, but I think there may be a day of reckoning coming for every city that we simply haven't been able to keep up. So, 2 things. I mean, obviously, we're going after the tougher streets, so we've got a number of criteria that are determining this. But I suspect we're also going to be starting to look more at different types of material in the ground. We're already looking more at plastic pipe and that sort of thing. And, whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But I think it's going to be one of these things we may be forced into. So that's one comment. The other comment I have is that when you look at the capital improvement program, the streets that we're looking at, also, again, there's many criteria, but they're also some of the more traveled streets, Grove Street, CP Avenue, et cetera. So there are streets that really do need attention a little more often than some other ones might. So there's a lot of, I guess my ultimate point is there's a lot of discussion and criteria that go into selecting what we're going to do and then how much we've got to spend. So my hope is that we really look at the priorities of what do we spend all of our tax dollars on, whether it's repairing streets or, whatever. That, I think, is as much a discussion as should Grove Street get fixed before CP Avenue or something like that. So I'll plant that seed. Thank you.
If you're a betting man, what's your thoughts on us getting this BIL funding?
Crystal ball.
I don't want to affect our chances if anyone is watching.
I think it's now called IRA funding, isn't it? The Inflation Reduction Act, isn't that kind of the new version of it? I don't know. What's happened in the last few grants hasn't been real encouraging, has it?
Now, based on what Paul just said, and some of that could be the reason, is that we just did Main Street, and we just had a large grant for Mulberry Street. So maybe in that last round, there were some effects of that, potentially.
Giving some other communities a turn or something.
Correct. So hopefully, we're hoping that in this reapplication on a couple of these projects that maybe one will come through. I will give some good news. We did get an email in the last 2 weeks from the LRIP program. So the Milton Street project in 25, we did secure the LRIP funding. I believe it's about $32,000 for a portion of that work. So some funding did come in the last month.
I can tell you it won't be for lack of trying.
If you don't try, you don't get it.
That's right.
So,
yep, and we're gonna stand in line as long as we have to.
I've got a question, and maybe the answer's obvious, but what would it take for us to be closer to our goals instead of not meeting that 60 or 80?
Probably more
year
money.
goal? I mean, is it just dollars?
Yeah.
Is it just dollars? Is it just, we don't have the budget to be able to improve things on a faster pace?
Initially, I would say yes, and I'll look for your opinions on this too, Dwayne. The other thing that we've gotten concerned about with the bill funding or whatever is that contractors are going to get incredibly busy, and so we don't know what timing is going to be like. So that's probably going to be something that's way out of our control. So we could budget enough money to do it, but if there's not enough contractors, then we've got an issue. But I think initially it's dollars.
we could show more, but I felt that even with the CIP, the way we have it laid out in the program, there are some dollars and some difficult decisions coming with the dollars that we're showing already. But at the same time, wanted to at least show how does that equate to the maintenance plan. Of course, prior to 1990, the maintenance schedule was probably on a pace for much higher than what we are at right now. So we should also say that in the last 20 years, there has been an improvement on that maintenance.
As far as streets, I think our streets are in better condition. We're spending less money on full reconstructions and more money on maintenance. And I think that's overall been a very good thing for both monetarily and for the state of the streets.
Seems to be less street rebuild since I've come here. I first got on board, we were doing 2 or 3 a year almost, it seems like.
It was mostly street builds and very little maintenance.
Yeah,
is what I
because we
remember.
were doing rebuilds because we weren't maintaining them.
And we didn't have, yeah, so that change, I think, was a very good thing.
Yeah. 'Cause we went less rebuilds because it's a major inconvenience for homeowners to just dig out the whole street.
And if we can do, correct me if I'm wrong, but the base can last a long time if you keep the water out of it. So the more we can do on that crack sealing and seal coating to do that and make that last, make so we need even fewer street builds, the better. And I'm a fan of adjusting, the pacer rating didn't drop like we thought it would, okay, it can go out, or it dropped faster, we have to pull it in. I prefer maintenance based upon analysis as opposed to maintenance based on schedule. So for water and sewer, can that there's a possibility, at least for larger mains, I don't know how small you can go for televising mains, which provides information on the condition of the mains, which can help very much in deciding what to replace and what not to replace, regardless of the age. Water mains, I don't think you can really do that. So the best information you have is where are they breaking? And when it's breaking in an area, absolutely, it makes sense to replace the mains in that area. But, I'm not in favor of we need to hit this 80-year or this 100-year. That's my input.
Well, you hit on a topic that we might want to talk about a little bit is obviously College Street, we're proposing and moving forward with that work for next year. You may have some discussion that you may want to talk about. We have been having some water main breaks on Prospect in the past several months.
Which part of Prospect?
East Prospect?
East Prospect.
Okay.
And East Prospect is currently as a 2025 project.
Right.
There's no storm sewer in East Prospect, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said, Craig.
No storm sewer? Is
That is correct.
Yeah.
There's often a correlation there.
Perhaps.
I wonder that might relate to a question that I had. It looks like the project list and one of the maps don't completely jive. I noticed that Moss was highlighted on one of the maps, and I thought that was on the list for 2025. So I just wanted to check and see if those are, because that's one I've heard from citizens on Moss.
So the intention there is, what Greg had mentioned was the storm sewer. And the storm sewer would come from Mulberry Street, and the end of that project would head down Moss and would serve that area of Prospect between Birch and Moss. There are a number of streets that are also highlighted on that map, as you note, Lisa, that are probably in that mill and overlay area. So when we would do this project and we'd be looking at storm sewer, what we're proposing is we would extend into those areas and maybe keep it as a mill and overlay, but not totally reconstruct it. I think that also happens in the Norton in the year that we are looking at, I believe it's Norton, one second, Norton, Franklin, and Fargo. Some of those will require reconstruct, and hopefully some portions of those will be a mill and over, or pulverization and relay of asphalt. Again, that will determine when we get into very close analysis of the underground utilities, that'll determine whether we can do some of that as a mill and overlay project.
Okay, I'm still not sure I'm following that. So on the map for 2023 CIP and bill funding, so it's the map number 2, parts of East Prospect, Moss, Shore, parts of Mulberry are shown for 2023.
Yeah.
But then on the list of projects, I thought that those were earmarked for 2025. So that's where I was getting, seeing a difference. I just want to make sure I know what we're being asked to approve again. So.
All right, I think maybe it's the map legend that is confusing. Anything that's in red is just in the program, is in the CIP program.
Okay.
And what we tried to do with yellow was to show what has been applied as a bill funding. And recall if when we were going through that list, if the bill funding doesn't come through, the yellow ones are probably not in your CIP plan.
Got it.
Okay.
Or we will have a difficult decision because instead of getting 80-20 funding, that would significantly change the dollars associated with those projects. So in those two maps, both 1 and 2, the distinction on the map is, was it part of the bill funding or was it not?
Okay, and so even though the map says 2023, it's for the 5-year CIP, so it doesn't mean all of those red-colored streets are being done in 2023. It means they're in the 5-year
Correct.
schedule. Okay,
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks, okay.
And 2023 project is currently College Street.
East College.
So if we go back to then the CIP spreadsheet, which one would be called?
And that's the only one,
Right.
correct, for 2023?
I will find it. The capital improvements by project, capital improvement projects by department.
Mm-hmm.
That listing from our Planet software shows what year we're proposing, what dollars. And again, if we recall from last year, the first number in a year is really the planning, because we will have planning costs for the plan sets. And then we look to do the construction and the final design in the early part of January. So each project really overlays into 2 budgets. So for example, in the 22 budget, there was already funds for the early design of College Street. So in 2023, what you're really approving is the final design and the construction of College Street. And this is the rest of the dynamic capital improvement plan. But each year, it's dynamic. I hope that helps.
Is there anything that we should be aware of or you want to highlight as far as the equipment purchases? Because I see you've got a 5-year plan and certain things, you know, that are.
Yeah, I was hoping to go through the 2023, some of the equipment purchases.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I may just make a couple of quick comments. First of all, you'll see that in every department, we've got an answering service notification system. That's an emergency notification system, et cetera. I found out at 1:30 today that WPPI is actually investigating this pretty heavy too. So this might be one, I mean, it's not a lot, every department, but this might be one we can take out because they're not only investigating the type of product to use, but how they might be able to cost share that through all the members. So I don't know if it's because my timing is incredibly good or I'm just one lucky dude, but that one we can take out. or at least lessen for '23.
Right.
The other,
It's another example of one of those dynamic changes, isn't it?
yes, it is. Yes, it is, and those are constant. The other two comments I've got is that you'll see in the equipment purchases, there's a lot of interdepartmental sharing, and we worked really hard on that. And what we tried to do is not only share the costs, but put a little more weight, if you will, on the utilities, given that there's some of the specialized equipment that they tend to use more, and again, they're not in the tax roll. And so if we can reduce the amount of money used on the tax roll for equipment, and we can share it, again, the utilities still have to pay for it, or people still have to pay for it, but that was a very conscious effort to share as much equipment as we possibly can. And then the last thing I'll mention, I kind of alluded to it, you'll see, I'll give you an example. Under the electric utility, there's a bucket truck for $450,000. Now, I will tell you, first of all, that when I started here 16 years ago, we bought a bucket truck, and it was less than $200,000. So, stay tuned to that sort of thing. But we know already that if we were to order that bucket truck today, it'll be 24 months before we get it. And they do put cost escalators typically in those contracts. You'll see that we've budgeted one for 2027 at $500,000. I don't think that's unrealistic. 2 points there. One is we have to be aware of what inflation is doing right now. And secondly, we'll probably have to do some carryovers. In other words, if the budget is approved and we order our bucket truck, that money will have to carry over until we actually pay for it. And there's a number of bigger items like that. I think in the wastewater department, it's the vac truck, same type of deal.
Why is there a bucket truck after 4 years?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Bucket truck in 23, and then another one in 2027?
Thank you. We have two bucket trucks.
Yeah.
And so we would be replacing.
Every 8 years?
Actually, the one that we want to replace in '23 will be 20 years old in '23, and then the one that we want to replace in '27 will be 20 years old at that time.
It's a bubble.
Yeah, which is kind of the life of them, but we take pretty darn good care of them, so we can get more. So then I'll answer any other specific questions that you've got, you guys.
Is there anything in 2023 that's not a replacement, that's something kind of new? Maybe electronic signs or?
The electronic signs are the mini excavator.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I didn't really look that close here. Oh, generators for the wastewater treatment plant. Now, those are to take out to the lift stations.
Oh.
So they're portable generators to use at the lift stations when power fails, but it never does. So.
There's generator for DPW parks here too.
Yes, that is for the building. That one's for the building.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Another one is if you see the 6-foot diameter street surface cutter.
Yeah.
That's a piece of equipment that works on a skid steer. And all it is a giant hole saw, if you know what a hole saw is. So that instead of having to break out all kinds of concrete and risk breaking the equipment below it or the structure below it, it's just a giant saw that we can use to replace manholes, basically, manhole covers. We know we're going to be doing some of that on North Main Street. And we're also trying to do our best to do some of the sewer work, if you will, on any kind of street construction projects, that sort of thing, do it ourselves as a way to save some money. So that's why we put that in here. I think other than that, it is replacement. There's a specific one you can find, Mark, that I'm missing.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm looking at the bottom line as you move through the 5 years, and that's some big dollars, big increases.
It's usually been the case all along. It's a wish list.
But I mean, some of it's timing, right, of like
Yeah.
when you have to buy these bucket trucks or other big ticket items. I know it fluctuates.
Well, we try to stay to about a 5-year replacement schedule, and so the things that you see, the trucks, the bucket truck, et cetera, those are in our 5-year plan. But as you stated, it's a big number, and when we hit the big ticket items like the bucket trucks and the digger trucks, it looks tough. I mean, it's a tough budget situation. We do, to a certain extent, try to keep it balanced, at least as far as equipment goes, so that each year it's approximately the same.
It usually helps to include last year's, so we know what the jump was from last year to this year.
That's a good point. We can get that.
Or at least last 2 years would be great, but last year's column would be swell. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Or Dwayne probably has it.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah, Dan's right.
From last summer, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
There's an archive on the website.
Exactly. I'm looking, if you want to continue the discussion, I'll see if we can find last year's.
But it usually helps, it'd be easier for us to just have it for each year, to know what last year's was, to see what kind of big increase it was, so, yeah. Any other questions on the budget items?
Just, only other thing, I'm just wondering about rates, and do we need to do anything about rates to?
I can give you, I don't think so right now. The water utility is doing much better than it had done. The LSLs are still doing some of the damage to us, but we are seeing a decent growth in our margin. And right now, the electric is pretty healthy. And I think as long as we can stay away from too much capital expense on subdivisions, et cetera, that if that slows down, that actually would be a benefit to us. I do think that, well, you've already talked about it. At the end of this year, we will do a rate analysis for both the water and electric and just see where we're at. But at this point, I'm never going to say never, but our cash flow is looking pretty good, actually.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I'll take a roll call vote on motion 22-8-2.
All right. Mr. Polachek,
Aye to approve.
Mr. Picard,
Aye.
Mr. Temperley,
Aye.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
motion passes 4-0.
Okay, this is new for us. Item agenda 10, convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85(1)E, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, investing in public funds whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. So at this time, we're in closed session. We'll just wait till the camera goes off. How we take a 10-minute break?
If I'm really quick, are you comfortable with Scott and Travis staying here because they know a lot lot this?
Well, I assume I know what this is about, so yes.
Yeah, okay.
So,
and you're okay staying in this room?
yeah,
also?
do you guys want to come up here? I can move down so you guys are in the middle of us, so we can hear you better. Okay, but let's take a 10-minute.